Hi everyone, my name is Sugihara. I'm the Associate Professor of Saxophone at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas. Today in this video, I will be demonstrating all three of the all-state saxophone audition music and talk about how to practice and better prepare for your audition. I'm starting with the first etude, which is Failing number 6. Okay, so let's talk about how to approach this etude. Some of the practice tips that I have for you here might seem very obvious to you, but I cannot stress enough how important it is to practice with a metronome. So when you're first learning this piece, make sure that you're practicing with a slow enough tempo and also in a small enough section. And do not speed up or expand until you can play it perfectly. I think a lot of us really wants to get better very quickly, but the mistake that we make is to start practicing too fast in the earlier part of the learning process. And you have to remember that just being able to play fast is not the only sign of good technique. And being able to play slowly with a steady pulse is also a sign of a good technique. And I think we should really work on the steady and solid technique in the beginning of learning this piece. So I would start practicing by putting the metronome at 60 to 80 BPM for an eighth note pulse and gradually speed up. And this tempo might seem very, very slow, uncomfortably so, but we will not stay here for so long. And I think that you will get a lot of return in investment when you practice this slow in the beginning of your learning process. And once you reach 120, you can go down to 40 for a direct quarter note pulse with triple subdivisions. And when I speed up, I don't usually go up by like one click at a time, but I use a traditional metronome tempo marking. So between 40 and 60 BPM, it goes up by 2. And between 60 and 72, it goes by 3. And then between 72 and 120, it goes up by 4 clicks. And between 120 and 144, it goes up by 6. So just let me demonstrate a little bit. So I have a metronome at 60. So I'm really paying attention to the key height. I'm trying to keep my fingers close to the key, and I'm also paying attention to the articulation and dynamics and connecting the notes. And then, well, gradually, I'm going to skip, but I'm going to go to 120. And once you can play that perfectly, then you can go down to 40 BPM with a triple subdivision, which is essentially the same tempo. And then you can gradually speed up until you reach the performance tempo. In addition to practicing slowly and gradually speeding up, you can use these rhythmic variations to even out the technique also. So let me demonstrate. let's talk about fingering choices. There are not that many complicated situations in this etude, but you have to give careful consideration to the A-sharp fingerings. So in general, I would use side B flat for steps or scales and bis B flat for skips or arpeggios. So you should try both fingerings and decide which one works the best for you. Another thing is side C. In measure 30, please use a side C after your B so that the connection between B and C will be smoother. The few tricky part is a trill in measure 32, which goes by very quickly. So in order to accommodate this, I recommend making the trill into a turn. So instead of doing, just make it to a turn. And in this case, leave the octave key 3, 4, 5, 6 down for the C sharp so that the connection between D and C sharp is smoother. In other words, you can just lift 1 and 2 to go from D to C sharp back to D. There is only one dynamic indication in this etude. That's just the forte in the beginning. But you should not play the entire etude at loud dynamics and use more dynamic gestures and contrast. The one way to accomplish that is by following the melodic contour with dynamics. So when you go down in melody, you can get quieter, and then when you go up higher in the melody, you can get louder. But you have to be careful that if you overdo it, it becomes very nauseating and not musical. A few things to think about musically is probably the beginning and the end of the section and what kind of character you want. So the beginning, I would like a scherzo, so playful character, but forte, so more assertive. But then, by the end of that section, I think it can relax a little bit. And then there is a major character contrast here, going from the G major to its relative minor, the E minor. So this becomes more intense and perhaps more passionate. So I would use louder dynamics maybe, more intense vibrato. So, but the important thing is there is a clear contrast between the two sections. Then it becomes, it goes back to the major here. So this has to be much lighter. And in order to accomplish that, what you have to do is to play these high notes, that C here and also B here, quieter and then lighter than what you would normally want to do on downbeat. There are a few different ways to end this etude. One way would be to stay strong and be assertive. The another way would be to relax the last two measures to have more peaceful, playful kind of ending. This is a really lighthearted and playful and fun etude, and I hope you enjoy playing this. Next, I will demonstrate the second etude of the audition, which is failing number 33. And here's a performance or practice guide to the second etude. Once again, use the metronome. I think the meter and rhythm can be very challenging in slow etude like this one. So I recommend practicing with a 16th note subdivision on the metronome up first, like this. You can also practice with a tongued subdivision instead of the subdivision in the metronome. So this is a beautiful lyrical etude and it needs to sing. So focus on the legato approach to connect the notes and also bring out the lyrical and expressive phrasing by using vibrato and dynamic shaping. And before playing the entire etude, make sure to identify challenging sections, which in this case would be ornaments like trills, turns, and grace notes, and work on them before putting them in context. When you work on ornaments, make sure to practice without first and then with the ornament and go back and forth to make sure that you're not changing or distorting the rhythm. In measure 19 and 20, these trills and turns goes by very quickly, so I've just focused on a couple notes. Okay, let's talk about fingering choices. Once again, you have to give a careful consideration to A sharp and B flat fingering. The one exception is the C, B flat, A flat, the stepwise figure that happens a few times. And it might be easier to actually use this B flat instead of a side B flat in this case. And for A flat to B flat trill in measure 19, I recommend you just lifting 1 and 2 while keeping the G sharp key down. And for the same trill, octave higher in measure 24, start with A flat to this B flat trill just twice. And then A flat to, you add the side B flat to trill. I think this is a pretty good intonation. So, and then the trill from D flat to E flat in measure 34, you can actually use this key, side or the high F palm key. This makes the trill much easier. Unlike the last etude, this one has a lot of dynamic indications, so make sure to follow them so that you can create a beautiful and expressive phrasing. Once you can play this with a metronome with a steady tempo and pulse, you should actually play without the metronome to see where you can push and pull. In a slow etude like this, there are a lot of places that you can manipulate the tempo. And also in the middle of this etude, there is an ad libitum part, which is like a cadenza, so you can play freely. And I suggest that you kind of start slowly, speed up a little bit, and then slow down into the next measure. One thing to be careful is that here, before you go back to the next measure, make sure that you actually re-establish the steady pulse right away. Now I will demonstrate the third audition etude, which is failing number 14, and talk about how you can practice this. Everything that I talked about in the first etude applies to this one too. So make sure that you practice with the metronome and slowly and in a small section. And in this etude, I will start practicing again around 60 BPM for 8th note, and it is very, very slow, but be patient. And speed up gradually, and once you can play at 120, slow back down to 60, this time for quarter note pulse. And then again, gradually speed up to your desired performance tempo. It might also be a good idea to go beyond where you want to play and then come back down to the ideal performance tempo. In this etude, you can use the following rhythmic variations to work on the technically challenging part. This etude is pretty straightforward. It's in 2/4, mostly 16th notes. There is not really a special fingering consideration besides a couple of the A sharps that maybe you should take a look at. One thing that you have to pay attention is articulation. This is scaled so it has to sound light and playful. So for instance, in measure 1, if I do not lift the note before the staccato, it's going to sound very heavy. So it doesn't have that light-hearted character. So you do have to lift and make the note before staccato shorter. So let me demonstrate back to back. And I think dynamically too, that the note before staccato should be a little bit softer as well. You can practice the same thing here in the middle of the measure. You have the 2 slurred notes and then 2 staccatos. Same thing, the note before the staccato should be lighter. The exception is like the following measure here. Your A right there doesn't have to be lifted. It's not. I think that actually creates more choppiness rather than lightness. The last measure, the sextuplets, might be quite difficult at this tempo, so you can actually slow into it to have a nice, comfortable ending. I hope this video gave you some ideas of how to practice and prepare for your audition. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me at mas.sugihara@shsu.edu. Thank you for watching.